The blood pooled dark and thick between Lyric Kane's trembling fingers as he pressed gauze against the orc woman's side, watching crimson seep through the white fabric faster than he could replace it. She had collapsed against his doorway at dusk, her green skin pale with blood loss, her amber eyes rolling back as she tried to speak. And now she lay on his workbench in the candlelit cottage while he fought to keep her alive. He had treated arrow wounds before, knife cuts and farming accidents, but never anything this deep. Never on someone whose anatomy he only half understood, and certainly never on an orc who looked at him with such desperate, defiant trust even as consciousness slipped away from her. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steadier than his hands. "I need you awake. Tell me your name." Her lips moved, tusks gleaming in the flickering light. "Greta," she managed, the word barely a whisper. "Greta Ashford." Lyric blinked, an orc with a human surname. That alone told a story, though not one he had time to decipher. He grabbed his sharpest needle, already threaded with silk, and reached for the bottle of spirits he kept for sterilization. The wound ran from her lower ribs down across her hip, a savage gash that spoke of a blade meant to kill. Someone had tried to gut her, and nearly succeeded. "This is going to hurt," he warned, pouring the alcohol over the wound. She arched off the table with a strangled cry, her powerful hand shooting out to grip his wrist. For a moment he thought she might crush the bones, but her fingers only tightened, held, anchored herself to him as the pain washed through her. When she settled back down, panting, her eyes found his and locked there. He had never seen eyes like hers. Amber, yes, but not the flat yellow he had glimpsed on the few orcs he had seen from a distance. These were layered, complex, gold and bronze and copper all mixed together, with darker flecks that reminded him of autumn leaves. They were intelligent eyes, fierce eyes, and they watched him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I am going to stitch you closed," he said quietly, not looking away. "It will take time. Can you bear it? Do I have a choice?" Her voice was stronger now, rough like gravel but clear. "Always. But if I do not close this wound, you will bleed out by morning." She nodded once, a sharp jerk of her chin. "Then do it, healer." He positioned the first candle closer, angling it so the light fell directly on the wound. The cottage was small, just one room divided by function, and his workspace occupied the corner nearest the fireplace. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, casting strange shadows on the walls. Outside, the forest pressed close, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Lyric ignored it all, focusing entirely on the damaged flesh before him. The needle pierced skin, and Greta's entire body went rigid. He worked as quickly as he dared, each stitch small and precise, pulling the edges of the wound together bit by bit. She did not scream again, but he could hear her breathing change, becoming harsh and controlled, each exhale a deliberate effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and he watched as she fixed her gaze on the ceiling beams, counting them perhaps, or praying to whatever gods orcs prayed to. "Tell me what happened," he said after several minutes, hoping conversation might distract her. "Bandits." The word came through gritted teeth. "On the North Road, they thought I carried gold." "Did you? Do I look like I carry gold?" A hint of dark humor colored her voice despite the pain. "I am a ranger. I carry arrows and dried meat and not much else. A ranger." He tied off one length of silk and threaded another needle. The wound was long and he was not even halfway finished. "For which lord?" "No lord. Freelance. I track criminals through the borderlands, bring them to justice when I can." She sucked in a sharp breath as the needle went in again. "The bandits did not know that. They only saw an orc traveling alone, and assumed you were easy prey. They assumed wrong. I killed 3 before the 4th got his knife in me." Pride edged her words, fierce and unapologetic, He ran. I would have tracked him, but she gestured weakly at her side. But you were bleeding out. Lyric shook his head. You should have sought help immediately. I did. Your cottage was the first light I saw. He glanced toward the window, where darkness pressed against the glass. His home sat a half-mile from the nearest village, isolated by choice and necessity. The people in town tolerated him because they needed a healer, but they did not welcome him among them. He asked too many questions, challenged too many old ways. Solitude suited him better anyway. You are fortunate I was home, he said. Am I? Those amber eyes found his again, and something flickered in them, some emotion he could not name. You are human. You could have left me to die. The accusation stung because it was fair. Most humans would have done exactly that. Orcs were the enemy, or if not the enemy then certainly not friends. The wars between their peoples had ended only a generation ago, and the peace was fragile, maintained more by exhaustion than genuine accord. An orc bleeding on a human's doorstep represented danger, complication, the kind of trouble that could get a man ostracized or worse. I am a healer, Lyric said firmly. I swore an oath to help those in need regardless of who or what they are. Noble. The word could have been mockery, but her tone was soft, almost wondering. Foolish but noble. Perhaps both. He worked in silence for a while, his world narrowing to the candlelight, the needle, the green skin under his hands. She had scars, he noticed, old ones crisscrossing her arms and shoulders. A life of violence marked on her body, yet her hands, though calloused, were not brutish. Her fingers were long, almost elegant, the nails trimmed short and practical. She wore leather armor, good quality but well used, and her dark hair was braided tight to keep it from her face. Beautiful, some part of him thought, and then immediately rejected the notion as absurd. She was an orc. Green-skinned, tusked, fundamentally other. Beautiful was not a word that applied, yet he could not stop looking at her eyes. How long have you been a healer? She asked, pulling him from his thoughts. 10 years, more or less. I apprenticed under the physician in Clearwater until he died, then came here to set up my own practice. Why here? This place is barely a settlement. That is why. He tied off another stitch, checking his work. The wound was closing slowly but surely. In the cities, healers must follow guild rules, treat only certain patients, charge approved rates. Out here I can work as I see fit. And treat orc rangers who bleed on your doorstep. And that. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, softer. Thank you, Lyric Kane. I will not forget this. Hearing his name from her lips sent an odd jolt through him. He had not introduced himself, which meant she had asked, or read it somewhere, or simply remembered from some previous encounter he had forgotten. The intimacy of it unsettled him, and he focused harder on his work, counting stitches to keep his mind occupied. The candles burned lower. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The fire in the hearth crackled, and occasionally a log would split with a sharp pop that made them both flinch. Lyric's shoulders ached from hunching over, and his eyes burned from the close work, but he did not stop until the last stitch was in place and tied off. Done, he announced, sitting back. His hands were cramping and blood had dried under his fingernails. The wound is closed. Now your body must do the rest. Greta lifted her head slightly, looking down at his work. The stitches ran in a long, neat line, holding her together. You have skilled hands, healer. They are all I have. He stood, stretching, and moved to the basin to wash. The water turned pink, then red as he scrubbed. You need rest now. Sleep if you can. I will watch for fever. I cannot stay here. She tried to sit up and immediately gasped, falling back. You must lie still before you tear every stitch I just put in. Lyric dried his hands and came back to her side. You lost a great deal of blood. Your body needs time to recover. I am Orc. We heal quickly. Not that quickly. You will stay at least through tomorrow." He said it with finality, the voice he used with stubborn patients who thought they knew better than he did. To his surprise, she did not argue further. She simply closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she had fallen unconscious, but then she spoke. "The bandits. If they realize I survived, let me worry about that." Lyric fetched a blanket and draped it over her. She was too tall for the workbench, her feet hanging off the edge, but moving her to the bed would risk reopening the wound. "For now, you are safe. Safe." She tested the word like something foreign. "I do not think I have been safe in a very long time." The vulnerability in that admission struck him silent. He busied himself cleaning up, gathering the bloody gauze and used needles, stoking the fire to keep the cottage warm. When he glanced back at Greta, her eyes were still closed, but her breathing had not quite settled into the rhythm of sleep. She was merely resting, staying alert even in her weakened state. A warrior's habit, he supposed. He pulled a chair over and sat down beside the workbench. If she was going to stay awake, then so was he. Professional duty, he told himself. He would monitor her condition, watch for signs of infection or shock. That was all. But as the night deepened and the candles burned lower still, he found his gaze returning again and again to her face. The hard lines of exhaustion, the way her jaw clenched against residual pain, the surprising length of her eyelashes. And when she finally opened her eyes and caught him staring, he did not look away. "Why are you watching me?" she asked. "Making sure you are still breathing." "I am still breathing." "Good." He should have looked away then, should have busied himself with something, anything. Instead, he stayed exactly where he was. "Your eyes," he said, the words escaping before he could think better of them. "They are unusual. For an orc, you mean, for anyone." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "My father was human," she said quietly. "That is where the name Ashford comes from, and the eyes, I suppose. My mother said I have his eyes. Half orc. That explained much and complicated everything. She would belong fully to neither world, accepted by neither people. No wonder she worked alone. Where are your parents now?" he asked. "Dead. My father was killed by orcs who thought him a traitor for loving my mother. My mother died of grief a year later." She said it without emotion, stating facts. "I was 12. I am sorry, do not be. It was long ago." But the tightness around her eyes suggested it still hurt, that some wounds never truly healed. Lyric wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but words failed him. Instead, he reached out and adjusted the blanket, a small gesture of care. Her hand moved, catching his wrist again, but gently this time, not gripping but simply touching. "Why are you kind to me?" she asked, and the question held a weight that suggested she had been asking it her whole life. "Because you deserve kindness," he said simply. "Everyone does." Her thumb brushed across his pulse point, and he felt the calluses there, the roughness earned through hard living. "You are a strange man, Lyric Kane. So I have been told." They stayed like that, connected by the light touch, until her hand grew heavy and slipped away as sleep finally claimed her. Lyric sat back, exhaling a breath he had not realized he was holding. The candles had burned down to stubs, and the first hint of dawn grayed the windows. He should sleep as well, but he could not bring himself to leave her side. So he kept watch through the remainder of the night, feeding the fire when it burned low, checking her pulse and breathing, and trying very hard not to think about the way his heart had stuttered when she touched him. Morning came with birdsong and pale sunlight filtering through the shutters. Lyric rose stiffly, his body protesting the hours spent in the chair, and moved about the cottage quietly, preparing a simple breakfast. He had just set water to boil when Greta stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "You stayed." She sounded surprised. I said I would watch for fever. He brought her a cup of water, helping her lift her head enough to drink. How do you feel? Like I was gutted by a bandit. But there was strength in her voice that had been absent the night before. Better, though, hungry. A good sign. He ladled porridge into a bowl and brought it to her, along with a spoon. Can you sit? With his help, she managed to prop herself up against the wall at one end of the workbench, moving carefully to protect her wounded side. The effort left her breathing hard, but she took the bowl with steady hands and began to eat. Lyric tried not to stare at how her tusks affected the way she brought the spoon to her mouth, the small adjustments that were second nature to her. "This is good," she said after a few bites. "Simple but good. I am not much of a cook. Healing takes most of my time. Do you get many patients out here?" "Enough. Farming accidents, illnesses, the occasional injury from wild animals. Sometimes people come from the village, sometimes from farther away." He poured himself tea and leaned against the hearth. "I do well enough, alone. It was not a question. I prefer it that way." She studied him over the rim of her bowl. "No wife, no family?" "None. My parents died when I was young. I have a sister somewhere, married and moved east, but we do not correspond much." He shrugged. "Medicine is my life. It does not leave much room for anything else." "That sounds lonely." "It sounds like your life as well." She conceded the point with a slight dip of her head. "Perhaps we are both fools, then, choosing solitude over connection. Perhaps." He sipped his tea, watching steam curl in the morning light. "Or perhaps we simply understand that connection often brings more pain than joy." Spoken like someone who has been hurt. Spoken like someone who has lived. He set down his cup, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "You should rest more. I need to check your stitches." She finished the porridge and set the bowl aside, lying back down without protest. When he lifted the blanket and examined the wound, he was pleased to see no signs of infection. The flesh around the stitches was inflamed, but that was normal. No pus, no red streaking, no fever. Her orcish constitution was indeed helping her heal faster than a human would. "It looks good," he told her, covering her again. "Another day or two of rest and you should be able to move around more freely." "I cannot stay another day or two. I have work." "Your work will still be there when you heal. Dead, you are no good to anyone." She glared at him and he glared right back. Finally, she huffed out a breath. "You are stubborn." "Professional necessity. If I were not stubborn, half my patients would kill themselves through sheer foolishness." That startled a laugh out of her, which turned into a wince as the movement pulled at her stitches. "Careful, healer. You almost sound like you care." "I do care. You are my patient." "Is that all I am?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and dangerous. Lyric opened his mouth, closed it, found himself without an answer. She was his patient, yes. She was also an orc, a stranger, someone who would leave as soon as she could walk without tearing herself open again. What else could she be? But he remembered the way her eyes had locked onto his in the candlelight, the trust she had placed in his hands, the warmth of her touch on his wrist. He remembered thinking she was beautiful and dismissing the thought as nonsense, except it kept coming back, insistent and undeniable. "I do not know," he said finally, honestly. "I do not know what you are." Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. "Then we are even." "I do not know what you are either, Lyric Kane, but I am beginning to want to find out." Before he could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. They both froze. Lyric glanced at Greta, saw the instant tension in her body, the way her hand moved instinctively toward where her weapon would be if she had one. He had removed her sword belt when treating her, and it now lay across the room out of reach. "Stay quiet," he murmured, then moved to the door. "Who is it?" "Martin Keller from the village." The voice was familiar, belonging to one of the farmers who occasionally sought his services. I need to speak with you, healer. It is urgent. Lyric glanced back at Greta, then stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. Martin stood in the small yard, hat in hands, his weathered face creased with worry. Behind him, two other men waited, and Lyric recognized them as fellow farmers from the area. What is wrong? Lyric asked, keeping his tone neutral. There was trouble on the North Road yesterday, Martin said. Bandits attacked someone and there was killing. The militia found 3 bodies this morning, all cut down with a blade. Big blade, they said. Orc-sized. Lyric's stomach tightened. I see. And you came here because your cottage is the closest dwelling to where it happened. We wanted to make sure you were safe, and to warn you in case the orc comes this way. Martin leaned in, lowering his voice. They say it is a female traveling alone, dangerous as hell. If you see her, send word immediately. Do not try to approach her yourself. I appreciate the warning, Lyric said carefully, but I have seen no orcs on my property. Good, good, just keep your eyes open. Martin replaced his hat, preparing to leave. We will be organizing patrols, making sure everyone stays safe until she is found and dealt with. Dealt with? Lyric kept his voice level. You mean killed? If it comes to that, yes. She is a murderer, Kane, killed 3 men in cold blood. Or defended herself against bandits who attacked her first. The words came out sharper than he intended, and Martin's eyes narrowed. You sound like you sympathize with her. I sympathize with facts. 3 dead bandits on a road known for robbery tells me a different story than the one you are hearing. Bandits or not, she is still an orc. Martin's jaw set stubbornly. We have peace now, sure, but that does not mean we have to tolerate their kind killing humans, no matter the reason. Lyric wanted to argue further, to point out the hypocrisy and prejudice in that statement, but he knew it would accomplish nothing except make Martin suspicious. So he simply nodded. I will keep watch. Thank you for the warning. Martin and his companions left, heading back toward the village path. Lyric waited until they were out of sight before returning inside. Greta had pulled herself upright again, her face pale but determined. I heard, she said. They are hunting me. Yes. Then I must leave now, before they come back with more men and find me here. You are in no condition to travel. I am in no condition to get you killed for harboring me. She swung her legs off the workbench, teeth gritted against the pane. If they find me here, they will hang us both. He knew she was right. Hiding an orc accused of murder, even falsely accused, would mark him as a traitor. He would lose everything, his practice, his home, possibly his life. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to let her go, pretend she had never been here. But when he looked at her, struggling to stand, her hand pressed against the stitches holding her together, he could not do it. There is another way, he said. The old hunting lodge about 2 miles west of here. It has been abandoned for years, but the structure is sound. You could hide there while you finish healing. Why would you risk that? Because you are right. 3 dead bandits on the North Road tells me you defended yourself. Because the wound I stitched last night was made by someone trying to kill you, not someone trying to stop you from hurting others. He stepped closer, meeting her eyes. Because I do not believe you are a murderer, Greta Ashford, and I will not let them hang you for staying alive. She stared at him, and he watched several emotions cross her face in quick succession. Disbelief, suspicion, hope, and finally something that looked like the beginning of trust. You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish, still probably both. He offered her his arm. Can you walk? I will manage. It took them nearly an hour to cover the 2 miles, Greta leaning heavily on him, stopping frequently when the pain grew too intense. Lyric carried a pack with supplies, bandages and medicine, food and water, a blanket. The forest was thick here, old-growth trees blocking out much of the morning sun, and the hunting lodge appeared like a ghost from another time, its log walls weathered gray but intact. Inside, dust covered everything, but it was dry and defensible, with a fireplace and 4 walls and a door that still closed. Lyric helped Greta to the only piece of furniture that remained, a heavy wooden chair, and she sank into it gratefully. "I will bring more supplies tonight," he said, unpacking what he had brought. "Food, firewood, whatever you need. You cannot keep doing this. They will notice. I am a healer. I take walks in the woods gathering herbs. No one will question it." He knelt beside her, checking the stitches. A few had pulled and fresh blood seeped through her tunic, but the damage was not severe. He cleaned the wound and applied a fresh bandage. "I will come every evening to check on you." "Why?" The question again, persistent. "Why are you doing this?" He sat back on his heels, considering. Why was he doing this? For honor, for his oath as a healer, for the simple fact that it was right, all true. But underneath those noble reasons was something else, something he did not quite want to acknowledge. "Because when I look at you," he said slowly, "I do not see a monster. I do not see an enemy. I see a person who deserves the same chance at life as anyone else. That is more than most humans would see. Then most humans are not looking closely enough." She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek, a touch so gentle it made his breath stop. "Be careful, healer. Your kindness might get you killed. Then I will die well." He stood, breaking the contact before he did something foolish like lean into her touch. "I should return before anyone notices I am gone. Rest. Do not move around more than necessary, and for the love of everything, do not tear those stitches again." Bossy, stubborn, patient, that almost smile again, the one that made his chest feel tight. "Go, I will be here when you return." He left the lodge reluctantly, glancing back twice before the forest swallowed him. The walk back felt longer, his mind racing with everything that could go wrong. If Martin and his men decided to search the woods, if they found the lodge, if Greta's condition worsened, and she could not call for help. Every possibility spiraled into disaster. But he had made his choice. He would see it through. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks. He tended to his garden, prepared medicines, saw 2 patients from the village with minor ailments. He acted normal, pleasant, giving no indication that he had an orc hidden 2 miles away, or that his thoughts kept drifting back to amber eyes and a touch like absolution. When evening finally came, he packed a basket with food and medicine, wrapped it in cloth to disguise the contents, and set out under the pretense of gathering night-blooming herbs. The forest was dark, but he knew these paths well, and he reached the lodge without incident. Greta was asleep in the chair, her head tilted back, exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Lyric set down his basket quietly, not wanting to wake her, but her eyes opened immediately, alert despite the obvious fatigue. "You came back." She sounded almost surprised. "I said I would." He began unpacking the basket, laying out bread and cheese, dried meat, a small pot of honey. "How do you feel?" "Like I walked 2 miles with a hole in my side." "That is because you did, against medical advice." He brought her food and watched her eat, pleased to see her appetite had not diminished. "Any fever, dizziness?" "No, just pain." She met his eyes. "I have had worse." "That does not make me feel better about your life choices." She laughed at that, a real laugh this time, rich and warm. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges, and Lyric found himself smiling in response. They talked as the darkness deepened outside, careful to keep their voices low. She told him about her work, tracking criminals through the borderlands, the satisfaction of bringing justice to places where law rarely reached. He told her about his patients, the stubborn farmers and their equally stubborn livestock, the small miracles of healing and the occasional heartbreaking failure. You care about them, she observed, even though they keep you at arm's length. They are still people, still deserving of care. You have a generous heart, lyric Kane, or a stupid one. No, she shook her head firmly, not stupid. Rare. He did not know what to say to that, so he changed the subject, asking about her childhood, where she grew up, what she remembered of her parents. She spoke carefully at first, testing whether he truly wanted to know, then more freely as she realized his interest was genuine. "My mother taught me to track," she said, staring into the empty fireplace as though seeing memories in the cold ashes. "She said that orcs feel the forest differently than humans do, that we can sense the life in it, the patterns. My father taught me to think like the prey, to anticipate their moves. Together, they made me a hunter." Her voice softened. "I wish they had lived to see what I became. I think they would be proud. I think they would be as well." She glanced at him, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that needed no words. Two orphans, two solitary souls, finding unexpected kinship in a forgotten hunting lodge. "You should go," she said finally. "It is late, and you need rest as well. Will you be all right alone?" "I am always alone." The sadness in those words made him want to stay, to sit with her through the night so she would not have to face the darkness by herself. But she was right. He needed to maintain the appearance of normalcy, and that meant returning to his cottage before anyone noticed his extended absence. "I will come again tomorrow," he promised. "I will be here." The pattern continued for 3 days. Each evening, Lyric made the journey to the lodge with food and supplies, checking Greta's wound, ensuring she was healing properly. Each evening they talked, sharing stories and silences, building something that felt dangerously close to friendship. Or maybe more than friendship, though Lyric tried not to examine that thought too closely. On the 4th evening, he arrived to find her standing, practicing slow movements to test her mobility. She still favored her injured side, but she was upright, and the color had returned to her face. "You are looking stronger," he said, setting down his basket. "I feel stronger. Your stitching held." She moved carefully through a series of stretches, warrior's exercises designed to maintain flexibility. "Another few days and I will be ready to travel." The words should have relieved him. The longer she stayed, the greater the risk of discovery. Yet instead of relief, he felt something uncomfortably like disappointment. "Where will you go?" he asked, unpacking the food. "South, probably. There are always jobs along the border. People who need tracking done, problems that need solving." She paused mid-stretch, looking at him. "What is wrong?" "Nothing. You are a terrible liar for someone who keeps such dangerous secrets." He sat down on the floor, his back against the wall, suddenly tired. "I was just thinking that when you leave, this place will feel very empty." She lowered herself carefully to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Your cottage, my life." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Greta was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. "I was thinking the same thing. These evenings, talking with you, having someone who sees me as more than a monster or a tool. I have not felt this comfortable with another person in years. We are a pair, are we not? The lonely healer and the outcast ranger. A good pair, though." "Yes," he agreed. "A good pair." She shifted slightly, and her hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally, as though they had done this 1,000 times before. Lyric looked down at their joined hands, green skin against pale, so different yet fitting together perfectly. "This is dangerous," he said quietly. "Not just because you are wanted, but because of what we are. I know. People would never accept it, an orc and a human together. I know. We would be outcasts, both of us. Hunted, perhaps. I know, Lyric." She squeezed his hand gently. I know all of this, but knowing something is dangerous has never stopped me from doing it before. He turned to look at her, and found her already watching him with those extraordinary eyes, amber lit by the last rays of sunlight filtering through the cracks in the walls. She was so close he could see the faint scars on her face, the darker green striations in her skin, the way her tusks curved slightly upward. I have never felt this way about anyone, he confessed. I did not think I could. I have always been so focused on my work, on keeping myself separate. But then you collapsed on my doorstep, and now I cannot imagine my days without you in them. What are you saying? I am saying that I do not want you to leave. I am saying that when I look at you, I see someone I could. He stopped, afraid of the word, but she said it for him. Love. Yes. Love. She raised her free hand to his face, cupping his jaw, her thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. I could love you too, lyric Kane. I think perhaps I already do. He closed the distance between them, or maybe she did, or maybe they both moved at once. The kiss was gentle at first, careful, learning the shape of each other. Her tusks were smoother than he expected, warm against his skin, and her lips were soft. When they parted, both breathing harder, Lyric pressed his forehead to hers. We are going to make our lives very complicated, he murmured. I do not care, neither do I. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper, and Lyric felt something in his chest come loose, some knot of loneliness he had carried so long he had forgotten it was there. When they finally broke apart, he found himself smiling, really smiling in a way he had not in years. I should still go, he said reluctantly, but tomorrow I will bring dinner and we can talk about what comes next. I would like that. He stood, pulling her up with him, and they embraced carefully, mindful of her healing wound. She was tall enough that her chin rested on top of his head, and he felt surrounded by her, safe in a way that should have been impossible given their circumstances. The walk back to his cottage felt like floating. Lyric caught himself grinning at nothing, his mind replaying the kiss, the confession, the promise of tomorrow. He was so distracted that he did not notice the men waiting outside his door until he was nearly upon them. Martin Keller stood flanked by 4 others, all carrying weapons. Torches cast harsh shadows across their faces, and Lyric's heart sank as he saw the suspicion in their eyes. Evening, Kane, Martin said, his tone flat. Going for another walk. Gathering herbs, Lyric replied, keeping his voice steady. Same as always. Strange time to gather herbs full dark like this. Some plants are best collected at night. Their properties are strongest. He tried to move past them toward his door, but Martin stepped into his path. We have been watching you, the farmer said. These evening walks you take, always in the same direction, always carrying that basket. He gestured to the basket in Lyric's hand. Makes a man wonder what you are really doing out there. I told you, gathering herbs. Then you would not mind showing us what you collected tonight. Lyric's mind raced. The basket contained only the cloth he had used to wrap the food, but that cloth would smell of cheese and bread, and these men were not fools. If they searched him, searched his cottage, they would find evidence of his deception. I do mind, actually, he said coldly. You have no authority to search my belongings or question my movements. If you have a problem with my work, speak to the village elder. Already did. Martin's smile was unpleasant. He agrees you have been acting strange, secretive, and given that there is still an orc murderer loose in these woods, well, we have to consider all possibilities. You think I am hiding her. It was not a question. Are you? The smart answer was no, followed by an invitation to search his cottage and see for themselves that he harbored no fugitives. But Lyric had never been good at lying, and something in his face must have given him away, because Martin's expression hardened. Take him, the farmer ordered. Rough hands grabbed Lyric's arms, pinning them behind his back. He struggled briefly, more from instinct than any real hope of escape, and someone hit him across the back of the head hard enough to make his vision swim. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Martin giving orders. "3 of you search the cottage. If you find anything that suggests he is helping the orc, bring it. We will hold him in the village until we figure out where he has been going each night. And if we find the orc herself," one of the men asked, "kill her on sight. She is too dangerous to take alive." They dragged Lyric toward the village and he fought against them, panic overriding sense. If they found Greta, if they killed her, all because he had been careless enough to be followed. "Please," he gasped, still struggling. "Please, you do not understand." She defended herself. The bandits attacked her first. "Save your breath, Kane. You are already in enough trouble without confessing to treason." They threw him into the village's small jail, really just a reinforced shed with a barred door, and left him in darkness. Lyric paced the tiny space, his mind conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios. Greta waiting for him at the lodge, unaware that men were coming for her. Greta trying to fight in her weakened condition. Greta bleeding out alone because he had led them right to her. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the dark. Eventually, he heard voices outside, and the door opened to reveal Martin and the village elder, a woman named Sarah Keegan, whose family had lived in the area for generations. "We found your stash," Martin said, tossing a cloth bundle at Lyric's feet. He recognized it as the blanket he had brought to the lodge. Hidden in an old hunting lodge along with enough food and medicine for someone staying long-term. Care to explain? Lyric said nothing. Anything he said would only condemn him further. Sarah Keegan studied him with sharp eyes. "I have known you for 5 years, Lyric Kane. You are a good healer, conscientious and skilled, but you have always been too idealistic for your own good. So I am going to ask you once, and I want the truth. Are you sheltering the orc who killed those men?" "She did not murder them," Lyric said. "She defended herself against bandits who tried to kill her. They left her bleeding out in the middle of the road. I stitched her together, and she would have died otherwise." "That was your choice to make," Sarah said, "but hiding her, lying about it, that crosses a line." "What would you have done? Let her die?" "Yes." The word was hard, uncompromising. "Because the alternative risks all of us. We have peace now, Kane, but it is fragile. One wrong move, one orc killing humans no matter the reason, and we could have war again. I will not risk my people for the life of one orc, however justified her actions." "She is a person," Lyric argued. "She deserves justice, not execution. In a perfect world, perhaps, but this world is far from perfect." Sarah crossed her arms. "Where is she?" "Tell us now, and I will consider leniency in your sentencing." "No." "Then you will hang alongside her when we find her, and we will find her, Kane. My men are searching every abandoned structure within 5 miles. It is only a matter of time." They left him then, locking the door behind them. Lyric slumped against the wall, fighting despair. He had tried to save Greta and instead had condemned them both. The irony was bitter. He must have dozed eventually, exhaustion overcoming fear, because he woke to the sound of metal scraping metal. The door swung open, revealing not Martin or Sarah but a slim figure in dark clothing. "Up," Greta hissed, grabbing his arm. "We do not have much time." "How did you later?" "Move." She pulled him out of the shed and into the pre-dawn darkness. The village was silent, everyone still asleep, and she led him at a fast walk toward the forest edge. Lyric noticed she moved stiffly, clearly in pain, but she did not slow. "You should not have come," he said urgently. "They are looking for you. If they find you, they will not." "I covered our tracks." She glanced at him, and even in the dim light he could see her concern. "Are you hurt? They hit you." "I am fine." "But Greta, this makes it worse. Breaking me out means I know what it means. It means we leave, both of us, right now. They reached the tree line and she finally stopped, breathing hard. I heard them talking. They plan to hang you as a traitor. I will not let that happen. Where will we go? Away. Far enough that they cannot follow, deep enough into orc territory that no human will dare track us. She took his hand, and he saw that she had retrieved her sword, the blade now belted at her waist. I know people there, rangers who will shelter us until we figure out what comes next. You are giving up your life here. There is no life for me here. There never was. Her grip tightened. But there could be a life for us together. If you are willing. Lyric looked back at the village, at the cottage he had built, the practice he had established, the small corner of the world he had carved out for himself. He was giving up everything, throwing away years of work, making himself an outcast. But when he looked at Greta, at the hope and fear mingled in her amber eyes, the choice was not difficult at all. "I am willing," he said. They ran. The journey took 2 weeks, moving carefully to avoid pursuit, sleeping rough and eating whatever they could hunt or forage. Greta's wound held, though Lyric worried over it constantly, changing bandages and checking for infection. She bore his fussing with patient amusement, and gradually he learned to trust her toughness, her body's ability to heal. They crossed into orc territory on the 10th day, and Lyric saw how Greta's posture changed, becoming both more relaxed and more alert. This was her world, or at least closer to it, and she navigated the rough terrain with confidence. "Will they accept me?" he asked one night as they camped beside a stream, the rangers. "Yes, they care about skill and honor, not species. Most of them are outcasts anyway, like me." She poked at their small fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. "The clans are different, more traditional, but we will not be going to them." "Where will we go then?" "There is a settlement crossroads built where orc and human territories meet. It is rough, lawless, but neutral. People go there when they do not fit anywhere else." She glanced at him. "We would fit. A town of outcasts. A town of survivors." He smiled at that. "It sounds perfect." They reached Crossroads 3 days later, and Lyric saw immediately what Greta meant. The settlement was a chaotic mix of races and species, orcs and humans, and even a few elves, all going about their business with wary but practical tolerance. No one looked at him and Greta walking together as though it were strange. No one looked at them at all. Greta led him to a building near the center of town, a sturdy structure that served as both inn and meeting house. Inside, she spoke to a scarred orc woman who ran the place, and money changed hands, though Lyric had no idea where Greta had gotten coin. "We have a room for a month," she told him, leading him upstairs. "After that, we will need to work, earn our keep, but for now we can rest." The room was small but clean, with a real bed and a window overlooking the street. Lyric set down his pack and turned to find Greta watching him with an uncertain expression. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I know this is not what you imagined for your life." He crossed the room and took her hands. "A week ago, I imagined living alone in my cottage until I died, treating farmers and livestock and never getting close to anyone. Now I am in a town I have never heard of with a woman I love beyond all reason. You are right, it is not what I imagined. It is better." Her smile was brilliant, unguarded in a way he had never seen before. "You love me beyond all reason, completely beyond all reason." She kissed him then, deep and fierce, and he kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you too, Lyric Kane. Foolish, stubborn, impossibly kind Lyric Kane. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. We are going to have quite a life together." "Yes, we are." They settled into Crossroads with surprising ease. Lyric set up a small practice, treating the inevitable injuries and illnesses that plagued any frontier town. Word spread quickly that he was skilled and fair, and soon he had more patients than he could handle. Greta returned to ranging, taking jobs tracking criminals or guiding travelers through dangerous territory, and her reputation grew as well. In the evenings, they would return to their room, comparing stories of their days, laughing at the absurdities of their new life, planning for a future that seemed impossibly bright. Lyric had never been happier. 3 months after their arrival, Greta came home with a thoughtful expression that immediately caught his attention. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong, I was just thinking." She sat down beside him on the bed. "In Crossroads, there are people who perform bonding ceremonies. Not marriages exactly, since no church recognizes unions between species, but something similar. A public declaration, a commitment." His heart started beating faster. "Are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we have built a life here, a good life. And I want to make it official in whatever way we can." She took his hands, her amber eyes serious. "I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours if you want the same." "Yes," he did not hesitate. "Yes, absolutely yes." They held the ceremony a week later in the courtyard of the inn, with the few friends they had made in Crossroads standing witness. The bonding ritual was simple, an exchange of vows and the tying of a cord around their joined hands, symbolizing their connection. But when Lyric looked into Greta's eyes and promised to stand with her through whatever came, he felt the weight and meaning of it more deeply than any elaborate ceremony could have conveyed. "You are my heart," he told her. "My home. My future. I choose you now and always." "You are my safety," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "My peace. My joy. I choose you now and always." When the cord was tied and they kissed to seal the bond, cheers erupted around them, orcs and humans and others all celebrating without prejudice or judgment. It was everything Lyric had never known he wanted, and as he held Greta close, he felt truly blessed for the first time in his life. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were people who objected to their union, humans who spat at them on the street and orcs who muttered about blood traitors. There were times when work was scarce and money tight, when old injuries flared up, and Lyric spent long nights worrying over Greta's health. There were arguments and misunderstandings, the inevitable friction of two strong-willed people learning to share a life. But through it all, they chose each other. Every day, in 100 small ways, they chose each other. 5 years after fleeing his cottage, Lyric found himself standing in their new home, a small house on the outskirts of Crossroads that they had saved for years to buy. It had a real workspace for his medicine, a garden for herbs, and a porch where they could sit together in the evenings. Greta had hung her weapons above the door, a declaration that this was a place of peace, a place she could rest. She came up behind him as he surveyed their land, wrapping her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am," he said honestly. "About how a dying orc on my doorstep became the best thing that ever happened to me. Not dying, you made sure of that. We saved each other." "Yes," she kissed the top of his head. "We did." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the wild lands beyond Crossroads, Greta took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Lyric looked at her in confusion, then understanding dawned, followed by wonder so profound he could barely breathe. "Are you?" "Yes." Her smile was radiant. "I know it is complicated, half orc and half human children do not always, it is perfect." He pulled her close, kissing her thoroughly. "You are perfect. This life is perfect. Careful, healer. If you keep saying that, fate might decide to prove you wrong. Let it try." We have survived worse." 9 months later, their daughter was born, a tiny creature with green-tinged skin and her mother's eyes. They named her Hope, because that was what she represented, proof that two different worlds could come together and create something beautiful. Lyric held her in his arms and marveled at the weight of her, the realness. He thought about the night Greta had collapsed on his doorstep, how close he had come to turning her away out of fear. One different choice, and he would have lost all of this family, this love, this impossible, wonderful life. "What are you thinking?" Greta asked from the bed, tired but glowing. "That I am glad I looked into your eyes that night," he said. "That I am glad I could not look away." "Why could you not look away?" "Because I saw you," he said simply. "The real you, and once I saw that, I could never unsee it, never wanted to." She held out her hand, and he came to sit beside her, their daughter cradled between them. Greta leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stayed like that for a long time, watching Hope sleep, marveling at the tiny miracle they had created. Outside, Crossroads continued its chaotic existence, neutral ground where outcasts made their home. But in this small house, in this quiet moment, Lyric and Greta had found something rarer than peace. They had found belonging, acceptance, love without reservation or condition. Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask about how her parents met, Lyric would tell her the story. About a desperate orc and a lonely healer, about candlelight and stitches and eyes that held entire worlds, about choosing each other despite every reason not to and building a life from that choice. Was it hard? Hope would ask. Being together when everyone said you should not be. Sometimes, Lyric would admit, but every good thing worth having is hard, and your mother was worth every difficulty, every sacrifice. Still am, Greta would interject, and they would laugh together, the three of them, a family that should not exist but somehow did. But that was years in the future. For now, in this moment, Lyric simply held his wife and daughter and felt grateful beyond measure. The world outside might be harsh and unforgiving, might judge them and fear them and wish them apart. But here, in their home, they had created something the world could not touch. Love. True love. The kind that healed wounds deeper than any blade could make. And it had all started with a woman bleeding on his doorstep and eyes he could not look away from. Eyes that had shown him who he could be if he was brave enough to try. He had been brave. They both had been. And now they had forever to keep being brave together. The seasons turned, and life in Crossroads continued its rhythm. Hope grew from infant to toddler, her personality emerging as a perfect blend of Greta's fierce independence and Lyric's thoughtful kindness. She had her mother's ability to move silently through the woods, and her father's gentle touch with the injured creatures she constantly brought home to fix. "She will be a handful," Greta predicted one evening, watching their daughter try to climb a tree that was far too large for her. "She has no fear. She has us," Lyric replied. "She does not need fear when she has protection. We cannot protect her from everything. Someday she will face people who hate her for being mixed blood. And when that day comes, we will teach her what you taught me. That other people's hatred says everything about them and nothing about her worth." He pulled Greta close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "She will be fine. She is ours. How could she be anything but extraordinary?" As Hope grew, so did their practice and reputation. Lyric became known throughout the region as the healer who would treat anyone regardless of species or ability to pay. Greta's skills as a ranger were sought by merchants and travelers who needed safe passage through dangerous territory. They built not just a life but a legacy, proving through their daily existence that human and orc could coexist, could love, could thrive. One autumn afternoon, nearly 7 years after they had fled to Crossroads, a visitor arrived at their door. Lyric answered the knock to find a human man in travel-worn clothes, middle-aged with a lined face that suggested hard living. "Lyric Kane?" the man asked hesitantly. "Yes. Do I know you?" "No, but I know of you. My name is Thomas Carrick. I am from your old village, the one you left." He glanced around nervously. "May I come in? What I have to say is not for public ears." Lyric's first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. He invited the man inside, and Greta emerged from the back room, her hand resting casually on her sword hilt. "This is my wife, Greta," Lyric said, watching Thomas's reaction. The man's eyes widened slightly at the sight of her, but he nodded respectfully. "It is an honor," Thomas said. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I have traveled far to find you, and what I have to say is important." "Then speak," Greta said bluntly. Thomas settled into the chair Lyric offered and took a breath. "The village you left, it has changed. After you fled, Sarah Keegan began questioning the wisdom of hunting you. She spoke to the people, made them see that perhaps their fear had overruled their judgment. It took time, but slowly opinions shifted." "Why are you telling me this?" Lyric asked. "Because 3 months ago a plague came to the village. Nothing terrible, but persistent, and our current healer does not have your skill. People are suffering, children especially. Sarah sent me to find you to ask if you would consider returning." The request hung in the air like smoke. Lyric looked at Greta, saw his own conflicted feelings reflected in her eyes. "They drove us out," Greta said coldly. "Tried to kill me, would have hanged Lyric for the crime of saving my life, and now they want help." "I know," Thomas said quietly. "Believe me, I know how it sounds. But people change. The village has changed. If you returned, you would be welcomed, both of you. Sarah has made that clear. We have a life here," Lyric said. "A daughter. I cannot uproot all of that on the chance that people have genuinely changed their minds." "I understand, but I had to ask." "The children," Thomas's voice broke slightly. "They deserve a healer who knows what he is doing. If you cannot come back permanently, would you at least visit? Help us get through this crisis." Lyric and Greta exchanged a long look, having one of those silent conversations that couples develop over years together. Finally, Greta nodded slightly. "1 visit," Lyric said. "I will come, treat the sick, teach your current healer what to do, but then I return here to my home and my family. That is all we ask. Thank you, Kane. You have no idea what this means." They set out 3 days later, Lyric traveling with Thomas while Greta stayed behind with Hope. The journey took a week, and with every mile closer to his old village, Lyric felt his tension increase. These people had been willing to kill him once. Could they truly have changed? He got his answer when they arrived. The village looked much the same, but the reception was vastly different. Sarah Keegan met him at the edge of town, and her expression was genuinely apologetic. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know we do not deserve your help after what we did." "No, you do not," Lyric agreed, "but I did not come for you. I came for the children who are suffering through no fault of their own." "Fair enough. Come, I will show you to the sick." He spent 2 weeks in the village, working dawn to dusk treating the plague victims. It was exhausting, demanding work, but satisfying in a way he had almost forgotten. These were his people, or had been once, and helping them felt right despite everything. The current healer, a young man named Peter, followed Lyric everywhere, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. By the end of the 2nd week, the plague was under control, and Peter had learned enough to handle future outbreaks. On his last evening in the village, Sarah called a meeting. Nearly everyone attended, packing into the community hall. Lyric stood at the front, uncomfortable with the attention, as Sarah addressed the crowd. "Lyric Kane came when we called, despite having every reason to refuse. He helped us, asked nothing in return, and proved what I have been saying for years now. We were wrong to drive him out. We were wrong to persecute him for showing mercy to someone in need. She looked directly at Lyric. On behalf of this village, I apologize. We treated you shamefully, and we are grateful you were the bigger person. Scattered applause broke out, growing louder, and Lyric felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Not forgiveness, not entirely, but perhaps the beginning of it. I appreciate the apology, he said when the noise died down. But I need you all to understand something. I have a life now, a good life with my wife and daughter. I am happy in Crossroads, and I will not be returning here permanently. We understand, Sarah said. But if you ever change your mind, the door is open, for you and your family. The journey back to Crossroads felt lighter somehow. Lyric had not realized how much he had been carrying, the weight of bitterness and betrayal, until some of it lifted. The village might never be home again, but at least it was no longer enemy territory. Greta and Hope met him at the edge of town, and he swept them both into his arms, holding tight. How did it go? Greta asked. Better than expected. They apologized. Do you forgive them? I am working on it. It is a process. She kissed him, understanding in the touch. Then we will work on it together. That is what we do. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm after that. The years continued to pass, marked by Hope's milestones and their own quiet achievements. Lyric expanded his practice, taking on apprentices like Peter who wanted to learn medicine without the prejudices of the traditional guilds. Greta founded a ranger school, teaching tracking and survival to anyone willing to learn, regardless of their species. They faced challenges, certainly. There were still people who objected to their relationship, who made life difficult in small and large ways. There were illnesses that tested Lyric's skills, dangerous jobs that saw Greta come home wounded. There were nights when Hope cried from nightmares about being different, about not belonging anywhere. But they weathered each storm together, their bond growing stronger rather than fraying. They learned that love was not just the passionate first kiss in an abandoned lodge, but also the quiet choice to stay, to work through difficulties, to keep choosing each other even when it would be easier not to. On their 10th anniversary of bonding, they returned to the spot where they had first confessed their feelings. The old hunting lodge still stood, though more weathered than before. They brought wine and bread, making a small celebration of the place where everything had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Greta asked, sitting beside him on the lodge's steps. "Giving up your old life for this uncertain one?" "Never." Lyric took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "This uncertain life has given me more joy than 100 certain ones ever could have." Even with all the difficulty, the prejudice, the struggle, especially with those things, they made us stronger, made us sure. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more still 10 years from now." "You are the best choice I ever made, Greta Ashford, the only choice that mattered." She kissed him then, long and deep and full of all the emotion that words could never quite capture. When they finally parted, both smiling, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "We should get back," Greta said reluctantly. "Hope will worry." "Let her worry a bit longer. I want to stay here with you just a while more." So they stayed, watching darkness fall, holding each other against the chill. Two people who should never have met, who had defied expectations and survived prejudice, and built something beautiful from nothing but determination and love. Eventually, they did return home, to their daughter and their house and their life in Crossroads. But that night in the old hunting lodge remained with them, a reminder of where they had come from and how far they had traveled. Years later, when Hope was grown and starting her own adventures, when Lyric's hair had gone gray and Greta moved a bit slower from old injuries. They would still make the journey to that lodge. They would sit on those steps and remember the night that changed everything, the moment when a lonely healer and a wounded ranger had looked into each other's eyes and seen possibility. "We did all right, did we not?" Greta would say, her voice rougher with age but still strong. "We did better than all right," Lyric would reply. "We did magnificently." And in the candlelight of their memories, they would still see it clearly. The blood, the pain, the desperate stitching. And underneath it all, the connection that had formed in that moment of vulnerability and trust. The foundation upon which they had built not just a life, but a legacy of love that would outlast them both. Because sometimes, the most important moments come when we are at our most desperate. When guards are down and pretenses stripped away. When all that remains is truth, raw and undeniable. Lyric had looked into Greta's eyes that first night and seen someone worth saving, worth risking everything for, worth loving beyond reason or sense, and he had never, not for one single moment in all the years that followed, regretted what he saw. Their story became legend in crossroads, told to young lovers who doubted whether their own mixed relationships could survive. The healer and the ranger, people called them, proof that love could transcend difference, that courage and commitment could build bridges where hatred had burned them down. But to Lyric and Greta, they were never a legend. They were simply themselves, two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other, day after day, year after year. Two people who had started with nothing but a wound to stitch and eyes that could not look away, and built from that foundation a love story for the ages. And when they were old and gray, sitting on their porch watching their grandchildren play, Greta would sometimes catch Lyric staring at her and she would ask, "What are you looking at?" "You," he would reply, the same answer he had given for decades. "Always you." "Why?" "Because I still cannot look away. Because your eyes still hold everything I need to see." And she would smile, that fierce, beautiful smile that had captivated him from the very beginning, and take his hand and they would sit in comfortable silence. Two souls perfectly matched, perfectly content. Their love had healed more than just physical wounds. It had healed the loneliness they had both carried, the sense of not belonging anywhere. It had healed old prejudices in those who knew them, proving that hate was learned and could be unlearned. It had healed the fractured border between their peoples, showing that peace was possible not through treaties but through genuine connection. All because one night, a healer had stitched an orc's deep wound by candlelight and could not look away from her eyes. All because they had both been brave enough to acknowledge what they saw in each other, and to fight for it against a world that insisted it was wrong. They had proven the world wrong. They had proven that love, real love, knew no boundaries of species or skin color or origin. That it asked only for courage, commitment, and the willingness to keep showing up day after day in the small and large moments that made up a life. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.